Awesome. Are you going to use headphones or?
I got headphones on.
Oh, you do? Oh, I couldn't see them. Oh, I need to get some black ones.
Again, the beard camouflages everything.
That's all we see, man. The beard is so glorious that everything else is secondary.
I'm okay with that. If people want to focus on the glory that is the red beard, I'm good with it.
So how many times a year do you play extra in like Viking shows and movies and Game of Thrones? I'm pretty sure I've seen you on Game of Thrones. I've seen you on Vikings. Like there must be a lot of demand for that beard, I think. Like with all
you would
these,
think, but I haven't capitalized on that yet. But I really should be reaching out to these guys and saying, I'm pre-made for this role, guys. Give it to me. I even did a little acting in junior high school. So I'm a professional, damn it.
No hair or makeup required.
Nope, just walk in, take off your glasses. Let's get her done, bud.
Actually, on that point, man, like I'm new to the beard scene. Like I've only had my beard now for like, what, 3 or 4 months? No, maybe a little bit longer. But I've never been without a barber. Do you trim yours yourself? What do you do?
Sure do.
Do you?
Yeah.
I just use clippers or just scissors or?
Oh, I just use scissors. The clippers, you'll mangle it. You just get a little pair of scissors, take off about 40 hairs at once and just keep keep that shape nice.
Yeah, because I noticed some of the guys who are sporting big beards have just kind of clipped it all down because they don't have anyone to help them shape it.
Oh no, you can do it yourself, and you just got to make sure you got a good beard oil too. That is important to any beard.
Yeah, no, I have a good
shiny
beard.
and supple.
Yeah, I have a good beard oil, but I was worried about that because mine's getting a little bit rough. But yeah, I think I'll do that. I'm gonna try to tackle with scissors. And I guess if I mangle it too bad, I could always take the clippers to it.
Yeah, but get yourself really good barber scissors.
Yeah, I think I do. Because of this, I have like 10 pairs of barber. Every time I have to buy new clippers, like you get the scissors with it, right?
Yeah. As long as you got the good ones, you'll be set up. So
thanks for joining me, man. Like I'm excited about this, and I mean it's taken us a while to have this chat, but I really wanted to have it with you because I've been following some of your posts on social media, Facebook specifically, and some of your questions regarding some of the policies that are coming around the pandemic, and I really wanted to have a chance for you and I to kind of unpack some of that conversation and talk about. I mean, you and I have a couple things in common. One is we're both small business owners.
Correct.
And I think that that's an interesting perspective that we can share. We both are kind of involved in politics, right? You have ambitions to run in 2021 for council.
Certainly do. I'm just right fed up with the way things are going right now. And we'll get into that a little bit later.
We'll get into that for sure. And the most exciting thing is that we're both hashtag girl dads.
Damn right.
That's right, man. It's the best thing ever. Your girls are old? How old?
My girls are 5 and 6. They just we just celebrated our first COVID birthday about a week and a half ago for my youngest.
And she was okay having it at home?
Oh, she was just thrilled. You know, we got pizza, got her a nice cake, and kids that age, if they have sugar in front of them, you can pretty much get yourself through anything.
You know what? Children are so resilient. I mean, my daughter, who's just over 2.5, and is very, always outdoorsy and very active and energetic. Like she's adapted so well to being at home, and she still runs around like crazy. And we still have to figure out outlets for her energy and get her out for walks and things like that. But children are so resilient, but her mood and her overall, zest for life hasn't changed a bit. We could all learn from that, I think.
Oh, that's, what, that is the thing that I'm probably the most proud of my girls so far through this, is that they've stayed so grounded and just open and available to new ideas and new concepts. The fact that they just adapt right away and just go, okay, I can deal with this now. You're just going, this is fantastic. I can't give you enough praise for how good you were handling this. My wife and I, on the other hand, were crawling up the walls.
Oh yeah, we're all a mess.
Exactly. But the kids are like, yeah, we'll deal with it.
Man, my appreciation for teachers and caregivers at our daughter's daycare has like exponential. I mean, I appreciated them before because they do such an amazing job, but it has exponentially increased. Because you don't understand, when you have your children full time at home, how much those individuals are contributing to raising your child.
Yes.
And what an amazing job they're doing. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I was always surprised, when I picked my daughter up from childcare, that how much she's learned and all the new stuff she's learned. And, so I knew that was being done. But now, like, just, whenever I drop my daughter off at daycare and they're, the kids are screaming and yelling and crying and all that, I'm like, man, it takes another level of angel, personality of passion or compassion and patience that I just don't have to do that. But just, we undervalue that essential. I mean, now everybody's talking about essential services and essential professions. We totally undervalue that one.
Well, I know, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's been a rough week for them for sure. Rough couple weeks for them for sure. I mean, our childcare was through our school, and every time I drop my girls off in the morning, there's a smile on each and every one of those guys' face, and astonishingly how well they just were able to make everybody feel very warm and welcomed into the childcare for my daughters. Even the school, the school, the teachers and the EAs, they were all there, and they made it a very, very lovely environment. I know the EA's got a rough bit of news, but it looks like there may be some school boards that are adapting this morning and avoiding some of those layoffs, which is phenomenal. I read that article this morning and I went, that's a school board's doing right by the EAs, which is great to hear.
Yeah. I mean, well, let's get more into that. But I also, I remember that you were working on this initiative, the Crime Prevention League. How's that going, and how's that affected by the pandemic?
Well, we're on full stop, unfortunately. We had just gone into the door knocking phase of that project. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, we had to go full stop on it, and the police have been redeployed. But the good news is, when it is coming back, the police have actually dedicated a specific resource to the city who's going to be using this program. And he just keeps saying he wants to roll it out to the entire city. And I got to be the wet blanket, unfortunately, and say, we got to slow it down just a little bit and get us some footing first in one of the wards prior to rolling it out all over the city. So it's going to go good once we get through this. And we know that the appetite is there for the communities. We keep talking to them, and they keep having the same issues over and over and over again, and increase now that the pandemic is on. I think in Ritchie, there was a rash of garage break-ins a week after the pandemic was announced, and they just the criminals just haven't stopped. White Ave, same thing. We reached out to a few businesses, again, just prior to this starting, and we had 7 or 8 businesses all come to a meeting. 7 or 8 of them all had similar stories about drug paraphernalia being chucked on their doorsteps, people defecating on their back alley, or not the back alleys, on their front doorsteps, drug deals going down right in front of the stores, as well as armed robberies. And this was consistent from 7 businesses on White Ave, of all places. So just shocking to hear some of the behavior leading up into this, and post and during, and we'll see what happens post for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that. I think Edmonton Police Service did a post about being extra careful about locking your cars and not leaving valuables in your car, because I guess less people are out and about, so there's less surveillance and just general neighbors keeping an eye, being able to keep an eye out for each other. So I guess that is the general trend that since the isolation, since the pandemic started, that crime is up in neighborhoods.
Well, I mean, that's anecdotally. I don't have any hard facts yet. I haven't looked at the police crime map this week yet, but anecdotally, we're hearing a lot more crime. The drug deals are still going down, and in very high amounts. But they're allowed. What's happening is everybody's completely distracted. So the criminals are still able to get out there and do exactly what they were doing prior to, just with less eyes on them.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but unfortunately, again, if we're going to look at increasing from where we were at in unemployment at 8.5%, I can only assume that the police service is going to be even more stretched after this. when we're sitting at 15, 16, 17%. It's going to be tough. So they're going to need all the resources and all the help they can get. And we're just hoping that we can offer that and maybe knock a couple percentage points off that those crime stats. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely going to have your work cut out for you after this is all over. It eases. But I'm glad that you've already had this initiative on the goes, and you guys will be able to kickstart it really quickly again. Okay, so let's get into some of this. I mean, I don't think I even actually properly introduced you. Derek Cockroft, small business owner, local, politically engaged guy who's also, doing work in different communities. You and I met probably 6 months ago, maybe almost a year ago, I think, right? You and I met, and
I guess it's been that long. Yeah,
man. Sometime last summer, sure. Yeah. Yep. So, I've seen, we went to some community meetings together. I know you're very passionate about doing work in the communities, and I'm excited about you running for election in 2021. If everybody every councillor who's rumored to run for mayor actually does, there'll be a lot of opportunities for new blood on council.
Which is what we desperately need at this stage.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I think let's go. There's two things I want to do today. One is I want to look at all the different initiatives being implemented and explored by all the three levels of government.
Absolutely.
I also want to talk about the impact of that on small business owners, because that's where you and I can really go into depth about. What do you think, just in general? Give me your perspective on the impact of COVID-19, the isolation, the slowdown in economic activity. Just give me your, 30,000 feet view on everything.
Absolutely. I'll start off and say it is scary. It is scary. On the personal toll that it's going to take on the population of North America is astronomical. Like that, when this unfolds, that's going to be one of the most scariest pandemics, I think, in the history of the world, other than, we're going to go back to the Black Plague or things of that nature. But this is going to be one of the bigger ones. The economy, it is such a quagmire to try to pick out and see where everything is going to be in 6 months. I mean, you hear the stats coming out of the Chamber of Commerce, and there was one that came out of the Small Business Institute in Saskatchewan this morning. 47% of small businesses do not think they're going to reopen once this pandemic is over. So you start looking at numbers like that and go, okay, well, what's that impact to the overall economy, and what does that look like? Well, that's 50% of an employer, of the biggest employer in most cities. Small businesses account for 90% of the employment in most cities. So you're looking at 50% of that 90% not coming back. That's a huge, huge impact to the overall unemployment figures. I mean, we could be looking, we talked earlier, and I mean, there were some estimates out there of 30% unemployment. Yep. To put that in perspective, the Great Depression peaked out at 24%.
Yep.
That's scary. And that economic activity, I mean, you just look at the amount of dollars flowing through local economies, flowing through even national economies. Every time that we see that, a dollar going somewhere else, that's $7 that we miss out on. And I'm kind of jumping around topics here.
No,
but that's a lot of economic activity that gets completely erased when these businesses go under. And those are businesses that support a lot of local initiatives, more so than a lot of the bigger companies. They're supporting a lot of local initiatives that, keep people in dance, keep kids playing hockey, keep kids playing sports of all kinds. That's where that funding comes from. And that's where the generosity comes from out of these businesses. Having all that evaporate, that's a trickle down effect to not-for-profits, the other small businesses in the area, the suppliers. It's going to be a huge, huge hurdle for us to rebuild the economy coming out of this.
And I'm glad you're saying things like that, Derek, because I mean, I think, depending on how you look at it, we're going into week 3 or 4 of, the real shutdown and the real impact. There's been so far, a lot of keep your head up and, we'll all get it through together, kind of advice for small business owners. And I think it's about time that we now start to look at some of the harsh realities of what could or may happen, and what we should be prepared for. What do you think are some of like the more, other than obviously job losses and economic losses, what do you think are some of the other harsh realities for small business owners?
The mental toll is going to be a big one on small business owners,
which is always there to begin with. Yeah.
Oh, it's always there. I mean, it's a stressful job. You and I both know that you're going to have a lot of stress being a small business owner. And I talk to guys all the time.
I know, but this is what, it's funny. I always think it's funny when small business owners go into politics, because I'm like, whenever somebody suggests to me to go into politics, I'm like, I already have a job where I'm underpaid, underappreciated, and overworked. Why would I sign up for another one? But you want to do that. You want to go from like one horrible job to another.
Why not just compound it? I'm professional at being kicked around at this point. So why not just steer into it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the mental toll for a lot of small business owners is going to be huge. I mean, there's not that support network built up for dealing with the mental side of small business. And I talked to a lot of small business owners, and the toll is unbelievable. And not having that support network built up, whether it's benefits that are provided from a regular employment or anything to those, any safety net provided by those, it's going to be a big toll. The mental health of the small business owner is going to have to be taken very seriously coming out of this, and how we can support the flip from being very reactive to getting back to that growth mentality that small business needs to survive. I've seen a lot of good resources starting to come out from the cities. There's some cities that have really bumped up their support for small businesses, not necessarily in the financial yet, but we'll deal with that a little bit later. But in the way that they're rolling out more programs focused on supporting the small business owner, whether it's advisory services, the mental health services that are out there for them to tackle. I'm thinking government is starting to realize that by supporting the small business and getting them the help that they need, getting them to get into that growth, getting past the fear phase and getting into the growth phase, that's a substantial win for the overall economy, more so than just bailing somebody out.
Yeah, but what does that leave us with, Derek? I mean, and I think it's time for those kinds of conversations. I mean, so far, all I've seen is, for us, programs of deferral and loans, right? And you and I both know that the last thing that a small business owner needs is more debt, right? Especially when we have no idea how we would pay off that debt coming out of this. So, for me, like, loans and, at no interest and, some of the things that are being proposed really does very little to help us get through this. And you talk about, so give me some examples of what other, let's start federally. So give me some examples of what other countries that are doing to help small business. Do you know of any like good ideas that you've seen?
Well, I mean, the good idea that Trudeau did implement, and I will give him props for this, is that 75% wage subsidy. That was originally done, I believe, in Denmark was the first country that came out and said, you know what, we're going to cover 80% of the wage.
Yep.
That was genius for him to follow that. I will say that program, when it is up and functional, that's going to be a lifesaver for a lot of small businesses. Even more so, keeping your employees engaged by keeping them at work and not having them have to deal with going on EI at this point. That's going to save a ton of stress to the employees as well too. So I will give props eternally for that program.
No, you're absolutely right. And while we're on the federal level, you and I've talked about this. A lot of people preach positive politics, but I really believe positive politics is about also recognizing when our elected officials and even those parties, if we happen to be partisan, if the opposition party is doing something really well, we should recognize it as well. So, I totally agree with you. I think some of the response from the federal government has been excellent. and one of those being that guaranteeing the 75%. I think it's
subsidy. Yeah.
I think Denmark, you gave that example, I think Denmark was 90%, and this is like a key differentiator though, I think, that I have to express, Derek, is 90% of wages for hourly people. And no one here has differentiated between hourly and salaried, right? So I thought that was really interesting that Denmark did that. So it's 90% of wages for hourly and 75% of salaried. You're correct on that, 75 salaried, but I don't think that we have put enough emphasis on the difference between hourly workers and salaried workers, right? You and I, we're self-employed, but let's say, in a real world where we had a salary, we could work from home and still collect our salary versus like workers. You don't go to work, you don't get paid, right?
Well, I was a little bit confused at the rollout on the 75%. So I've been watching Trudeau's press conferences every morning to try to get more information, try to figure it out. And I think originally
is he still in isolation?
Of course he is.
I love whenever Trudeau does something like grow a beard or like, I imagine his advisors like just huddling around and being like, yeah, this is polling really well. You being in isolation, like a man that's steering the ship,
leading by example, raw.
We just, let's just keep doing that. It's just, anyways,
you speak about his beard. I am 100% sure that he dyes the gray into his beard to make him look smarter. That's just a feeling I have. I have no proof on that, but
he dyes his hair for sure. I mean, every time I see his hair, it's a different shade. Like it goes from like brown to like dark black. So he dyes his hair for sure. Which, I mean, whatever. I mean, I'm sure he has grays showing. I mean, he's getting older. So, but yeah, the beard thing's a good. Yeah, I always think it's funny. Like it's just like him and our mayor like just have like the worst patches of gray like in their beards. And also those aren't. Let's face it, man. Those aren't real beards. You know what I mean?
These are real beards right here.
These are real beards.
These are real beards. Yeah.
That's just stubble.
That's just somebody told him exactly that you should grow a beard because it makes you look dignified.
Oh no, it adds gravitas, Derek.
Gravitas, there you go.
Gravitas, right? So let's talk about that. So let's talk about what other good stuff. I think the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, the CERB, I think is the equivalent of a universal basic income. I think that's a great idea, and I'm glad to see it as high as $500 a week or $2,000 a month. I think that's much needed. I'm a little bit concerned, and we'll wait and see because it just activated to see how that rolls out and who qualifies. Because I know the provincial one, the emergency isolation support, that one-time payment, I don't know a single person who qualified for that. All I know and all I've heard is people getting rejected. A few people saying they applied for it a second time and got it. I have no idea of, and most people don't, of like what actually qualifies them for that. We'll get to the provincial stuff, but I mean, I hope this is a better rollout than that benefit that was put out by the provincial government. And overall, I think, and also too, I mean, I'm a big believer in, large organizations like government need time to respond, and there's so many partners involved, and there's so many changes that have to be made. So I think that, as much as we can't be patient, we have to be patient. And I think that overall, the federal government's response has been excellent. It's been measured, and it seems like they're taking, their time to slowly roll out. Too much at once is not good either, right? Because they won't be able to, they don't have the infrastructure to support that either, right?
Right. And I would sort of agree with that the federal government's programs have been well thought out and brought out. I can't buy into the rollout stage though.
Okay.
I'm very, very concerned about how these are going to roll out, especially that wage subsidy. Now that what it's gone from was small businesses will qualify for this on Thursday or whenever he originally announced it. Then Monday, when he started talking about it, he went completely off script from what I understand and added in every business, added in the 30% reduction in income. And there was a third point that I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but he changed that mid-script. this wasn't what was submitted for vote, apparently. So that makes me worried. Oh, sorry. The third point was now it's going to be run through the CRA.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah,
always concerning.
As soon as the CRA was mentioned as a small business owner, I kind of I went skeptical right off the bat. Then hearing a little bit more about what Morneau was saying about it last night or the night before, the days are starting to get blurry, that how you're going to qualify and how you're going to have to prove your revenue has been affected. Again, that worries me. So that means that all the CRA, whenever this program launches, and I mean, it could be 3 or 4 payrolls deep before we actually start seeing any money coming back. How is the CRA going to get all this data done? Get all this data audited and make sure that the right people are getting the subsidy. The 10% subsidy that they originally announced, my payroll provider, I have a payroll provider that does everything for my direct deposit and everything. They had done a really good job of getting it into the regular payroll flow. So basically they said, you calculate what the 10% should look like, you punch it into this box, submit the payroll, we'll make sure we don't take it off your account. Perfect, great. That was nice and easy. I don't understand why you just didn't duplicate that on the 75%.
Yeah.
So we'll see how this goes with the CRA, and having to prove with the 30% decline in sales, it could get a little bit convoluted, especially if somebody's like me who's using the payroll provider. How are we going to loop them into the qualifications and et cetera, et cetera. So I got a little bit of concern about the rollout.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, there has to be more conversations about other expenses as well. I mean, for most small businesses, another big expense is rent and utilities, right? And there's been no support there. Like all I've seen so far is, loans and, interest-free loans and things like that. But, again, like we said, I mean, the last thing that a small business owner wants is more debt coming out of this. But, there has to be some sort of, especially for businesses that were forced to close, right, by government mandate, there has to be some sort of provision for them. The only thing I saw was on the Government of Alberta website. It was just like, we strongly recommend that landlords pass on, any property tax savings to their tenants, right?
Tenants.
Like that's not going to happen. I mean, they, and in fairness to landlords, both commercial and residential landlords, they also have their own expenses to worry about as well, right? So, this kind of stuff has to be regulated. It can't, all these, ideas of like, tenant and landlord should work things out together. Like those are nice in principle, but everybody's going to be looking out for their own best interest at this time, and that's also a survival instinct, right, for them as well.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you're asking for that negotiation to take place between two people that are diametrically opposed to what's going on, and especially lob on that stress of what's happening. That's not a good relationship. I mean, down in Calgary, I think there was an armed conflict over a possible eviction.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was a stabbing or a shooting. But yeah, it was. It's just nuts stress to have that added on, in this scenario. But you're speaking about utilities as well too. I mean, I look at EPCOR here in Edmonton. I mean, city council has control over EPCOR. A pseudo control over EPCOR. We'll say quote unquote.
No, it's not pseudo. City of Edmonton 100% owns EPCOR. And they assess and regulate EPCOR, according to shareholder meetings, et cetera, right?
Right, and they get paid a dividend off that. And
again, on their website, it says, we're looking at, for the government, the provincial government to, look at utilities deferral. I'm just like, what? Like,
don't look at it, just get it done.
Yeah, like, isn't that under the city's purview? Like, this is one of those things, like, I just, shake my head at and really frustrates me, and to the point of agitation, let's call it. But it's just like, to me, it's like, for the city, I think that would be like the easiest and quickest thing to implement is automatic
quick win for them, right? I mean,
like
look at the transmission fees.
Yeah, and some other cities have already done this in the U.S., Seattle, and
Yep.
I think some other cities have already done this. Like,
Yep.
you can't turn off utilities, and utility forgiveness for the next 3 months, or
Well,
whatever.
Ontario has just passed a cost cap on their per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
I think it was like their non-peak kilowatt cost. They set a cap, and they're going, we're not going to charge you any more than our off-peak rate, which is perfect. I mean, that is actual cost savings going to businesses and going to individuals. I mean, I just paid my utility bill this morning, or it automatically came out of my credit card, and they're still charging me the easy pay fee. I'm sitting there going, okay, so I'm paying you all this money, and you're still going to charge me the fee to use my credit card to pay this. And I'm just looking at them going, this is just wrong, guys. I mean, one, don't charge me that fee. That's just the cost of doing business. Try not to pass that on. Because you have a monopoly, don't play dirty like that.
A monopoly on a public utility.
Bingo, right?
Yeah.
Bingo. And secondly, give me, you always see the posts fly by of people putting their bills up there and saying, oh, my actual cost for energy was X, and my transmission rate was 3 times X. So you're looking at that going, just cut that a little bit. You'll be okay. You'll be okay without that dividend being paid to the city. Reinvest that back into it and give us some actual savings. That would be a utility company acting right.
Yeah, I know, but again, the more that we go into this, I think we're all starting to realize that none of these large corporations are going to do what's right. They're going to do what they're mandated to do. At the end of the day, what we're going to see, and I actually don't, this is what I've also already reconciled myself with, that bailouts are going to happen. You know what I mean? Utility companies, insurance companies, airlines, banks, everybody's going to be at the table for a bailout. So, there's no use protesting, getting upset about that. What we should be focused is what do we get in return for that eventual bailout money, right? And I think that's where we're falling short. It's like, I don't really, maybe it takes smarter guys than you and I, but I just don't understand why that's not automatic. Hey, listen, EPCOR, you're not going to charge utilities for the next, on a month by month basis. And some people say, oh, well, then people will waste stuff. Well, no, just, cap it. Like, just say, like, hey, Najib, your utilities, your residential utilities were X amount last April. That's your cap. You spend more than that, you got to pay it, right? You spend less.
That's totally fair.
Yeah, maybe if you spend less than that, it rolls to the next month or something, right? And I don't think should be a difficult thing for EPCOR to do. And the conversation that government should be having with these large organizations is just, listen, man, we're going to bail you out. We know that. We know that you have X amount of jobs and et cetera, and overhead, and
we're going to do everything we can to make sure the consumer is protected through all.
But you're not first in line. You're not first in line. First in line is the everyday citizen, and you're going to do your part to help the everyday citizen get through this, again, on a month-by-month basis, right? It doesn't even have to be, you have to do it for the next 6 months, or, by the way, we'll
reevaluate every 30 days with you and make sure that the programs are working. Yep.
Absolutely. And, by the way, I mean, it didn't take too long for the federal government to forgive rent fees to airport authorities, right? It didn't
take the feds too long to get that Amazon contract signed either. I was looking at that one, and trying to unravel that.
And it's just like, this is the problem, right? I mean, going back to positive politics, it's just like, one step forward, 2 steps back, right? It's just like, you do something good, but then you do something else that people are just shaking their heads and saying, how is this a priority? How is this more important than my immediate needs, in this time? Like, if you're not going to take care of your citizens now, if you're going to put, corporate bailouts ahead of the needs of your citizens, then when do citizens' needs get taken care of? Like, that's what I don't understand. Like, to me, this is a simple time for all of these organizations that are essential to our lives, like utilities, banks, et cetera, to be just told, listen, you are the ones who are going to take, in the short term, you're going to take the hit. 3 months, 6 months. Like, stop telling us that we should have 3 to 6 months worth of savings to get us through this. They should have. Are you telling me, like, a multi-billion-dollar corporation like EPCOR and the banks and the profits that they've posted quarter after quarter after quarter don't have enough money to get through 3 to 6 months? Are you joking? And you're telling me as a small business owner that I should have cushion? Are you joking? And then
what always got me about this over the last couple of weeks, and I was looking at this, I go, okay, so you've got So you've got this ability to give discounts. They could do that immediately. They could just start chopping bills.
Sure.
Instead, they decided to use all that money for virtue signaling commercials right off the bat.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
How quickly did those commercials start coming out, as opposed to, oh, I could cut your bill by $5 or $10, actual help. But no, I'm just going to do a commercial and I'm going to let you know how much I appreciate what you're doing, but no actual savings.
I mean, it's the same with the banks, right? Oh, you can have deferrals of 6 months on your mortgage and other loans if you qualify. Are you joking? Are you joking? I can get a deferral from my bank anytime I want. You know what I mean? They would rather that than me default on my loan. So this is nothing special, dear citizens, dear consumers. Keep this in mind.
They make more money off that deferral.
They actually make more money off of deferring. That's why that was the first thing that they announced and the first thing they implemented. And I think it's a disservice of government that they're actually advertising and promoting that. It's like somehow they're doing us a service by charging us interest for the period that we're going to be deferring.
Yeah, you flinched there a little bit, but I think you're okay.
Looks like I've lost it here though, so just hold on 1 second here.
I can still see you.
Okay, I'm back. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It is a disservice that they're cheering on these programs that are negatively impacting people, and especially now that, I mean, we should have expected it though. I mean, I think Morneau in his first term, when asked, is he going to look at consumer debt as a problem in for the average Canadian? He goes, oh, no, we're not going to factor that in. And I kind of was abacked by that and going, that's a huge expense. We have the most consumer debt of the G8 countries. To completely ignore something like that is
and our banks pay the least amount of taxes of all the G7 countries.
There you go. You know, other fun point that the relationship is very wrong in that relationship, right?
You know, and this is why I want to have these conversations, and I want to have more of these conversations, Derek, because I think somebody, you know, and I'm glad you've taken up that mantle, needs to, you know, put a spotlight on these things, because, you know, the danger is that as we're also worried about our livelihoods and taking care of our families and staying safe and all these things we're being told to do and we must do, and I'm not arguing that, but at the same time, I think that some accountability and some record has to be kept of how our elected officials have supported us and how they have failed us, right? Yes. And I hope that coming out of this situation, that's how we're all a little bit more enlightened. I mean, we have these conversations all the time around election time about, you know, who the best leader is, but I think in the times like this, we're really going to see, you know, what we get in return for our taxpayer salaries for elected officials and our votes as well, right? So I think that these conversations, you know, I think that, you know, for me as a small business owner, the conversation about keeping your head up and, you know, getting through like stormy season stuff has reached to the point of toxic positivity. Like I really think it has. Like I think I'm ready for, and I think a lot of not just small business owners, but a lot of citizens are ready for some real talk and real addressing of some of the stuff that's coming. The longer this continue, the more likely. I mean, things like, you know, earlier on, like 2-3 weeks ago, I saw all of these articles about how, food shortage is not going to be an issue, you know, and don't worry about food shortage. I mean, obviously they're trying to do that to prevent hoarding and panicking and things. But having worked
facts behind that,
absolutely, having worked in the food industry on the manufacturing side and packaged goods, you know, I said this 3 weeks ago. I'm like, you know, if people think that food shortage isn't a problem, they've got another thing coming, okay? Because our supply chain, which for decades has been managed under just in time, is not set up for something like this, okay?
Well,
we've already saw.
Look at that deal this morning, right? I mean, why is Amazon all of a sudden becoming the conduit for getting out medical supplies?
Yeah,
I read this and I just went, we've chipped into Canada Post for years and years and years and made this crown corporation, but yet they can't be the one that are distributing the medical supplies. There's something it just doesn't add up in my head. And the food supply, the same thing. You know, you look at, you know, straight from picking season, which I've got friends who have vineyards and apple orchards out in BC. And I talk to them and they echo this. They go, we bring in close to 1 million temporary foreign workers every year for picking season. But now with this influx of unemployment, that temporary foreign worker program could completely go away. So how is that food going to get picked and processed? And then, like you said, with the just-in-time distribution network, how much of an impact is that actually going to have? And how much stress is that going to have on the just-in-time? Yet
Well,
to
not
be
just that. I
determined.
mean,
But
as this goes on, and the U.S., isn't doing a great job of managing the pandemic there, right? I mean, they're
right,
now they have the most cases, and I think they're third in terms of deaths, right? And I think,
Yep.
and that's only going to get worse. And so how long before that becomes an issue with border crossing and truck drivers being able to bring food and goods from the U.S. into Canada? Like, these are all things that I think that we need to start talking about more seriously. And I'm obviously not advocating for hoarding and that's not what we want to do, and that's not the solution. But I think our regulators and our lawmakers need to seriously look at what that situation. I mean, right now a lot of the focus is on shelter, which it should be. At the end of the day, like, we all need to have some security in terms of having a roof over our heads. But the second thing now is going to be, I think, food is going to be a big concern, and you brought it up, right? And then that's just the beginning, right? Is getting growing the food, right? And never mind about processing it and our ability to do that. I mean, I say to anybody, I mean, after a week, you go into grocery stores and how sparse the shelves were. And that's all after a week of just social distancing and isolation. If we go into quarantine mode, what do you think is going to happen?
Oh,
you know what I mean?
It's going to be a nightmare.
And I don't hear any conversation from government about that, about what they're going to do about that and how they're managing and how they're preparing for that, right? And it seems like we're so ill prepared on every facet of something like this, that it's just a snowball effect, right? It's just like they're scrambling to solve one issue, and meanwhile the other issue is staring them in the face.
Well, but we've seen this before. I mean, this is the short-term thinking that a lot of governments come into when they take power. Is, oh, I've got 4 years to do all these changes that I want. I'm going to blast through everything and be damned about actually planning for the future, right? So they burn through all this funding and resources and money to pass their mandate in 4 years, instead of saying, okay, like any good business, what we want is predictability out of all these systems that we should create, whether it's the distribution system, whether it's the way businesses interact with the government. We just want predictability. So managing towards predictability, I hope, is a big realization that a lot of governments come to have post-pandemic. We should look after those basic needs, and we should look after the emergency needs as well too. And we should maintain those systems. Those systems should be maintained for exactly we talked about it a while ago, that this is not an isolated occurrence that is never going to happen again. This is going to happen again and again and again, whether it's economic, whether it's food related, or whether it's
natural
disaster, whether it's financial related. These things will happen again and again and again. So why not put some aside, quote unquote, for a rainy day, and make sure those systems are ample enough to get us through those first 2-3 weeks of any one of these crises. I hope that
when you look at the countries that have managed this well, and what I've looked at, like countries like Singapore, it's because they always built on the last disaster or crisis, right? And put in plans to mitigate the next one, right? And we don't do that. And I mean, I think some part of it is because we're fortunate in the West that, it doesn't happen as regularly as it does in other countries, right? And so they have better preparedness for these kinds of incidents. But that doesn't excuse us, I mean, like the financial collapse wasn't that long ago. H1N1 and SARS wasn't that long ago. Like, where's our, you would think it's to be like pandemic response in a box by now, boom. This is seriously, right? Like,
well, I mean, we're in an age of big learning and AI. Why not?
Absolutely. Are you joking? Like, and I hope that's what comes out of this one, is that, now there's like a plan, and boom, it's just, you just flick it on, and this is exactly what happens. There's no conversation need to be had.
That's right.
XYZ initiatives and stimulus just falls into place, right? But I just can't believe that we seem to be like scrambling, like this is the first time this has happened, right? And it's just, it speaks to, and exactly what you're saying, it's because we're always in this, cycle of re-election with all of our governments, for every 4 years, that, there's no there's no long-term thinking. There's no vision, as much as every plan they put out is called vision something. They're actually vision, right? Their vision as long as your mandate is, right?
That's right. So
I mean,
maybe take that out of it, but
yeah. This is the same conversation we should always have, right? There's like some things that, should not be profit driven, right? Like healthcare, education, and if you take out that profit motive, right? And food too, right? I mean, the reason why we got to just in time is because they wanted to increase the margins of, take out storage and buying futures and all. I mean, I'm sure they still do buy futures in ingredients and things like that, but they wanted to reduce all of that to increase profit margins. Like, at some point that conversation should be had as well, right? Food is essential, right? So,
maybe you're okay just making that 10% as opposed to your 30 or 40% on
like
markup on this stuff.
Do our largest food companies in the world need to be multi-billion dollar corporations? Like, do they need to be that way, right? And these are the kind of things I think we need to start looking at. I mean, I think one of the big thing as we have these conversations and what happens next, whether we keep in universal basic income and, guaranteed sick leave and all of these kinds of things for what they're calling, essential workers now, right? It's amazing how that conversation has changed now to like,
let's not get started on the essential worker thing.
Right. Is that, how many of these things do we just keep in and just say this is a natural part of running a country? Like, these are just guaranteed securities and assurances that everyday citizens should have.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what comes about on the other end. I mean, we're going to disagree on some of the points there, but we'll see what comes out about this. And I hope that learning takes place. I echo that statement that you said. Learn from this one. Make sure that the next time it is a flick a switch on and we go with it. That's going to be very important. Will it happen? I mean, I don't know. That's where I'm kind of maybe not as optimistic as you that these organizations learn and they are able to adapt. I don't know if I've got that much optimism that you have out of this, but.
Well, let's talk about more about that at the end, but let's look at provincial now. We kind of unpacked federal and initiatives, but about provincial, like, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was really optimistic because I thought that, Premier Kenney was doing a great job, listening to the recommendations of the experts and the medical and experts in the scientific community, but nothing's happened. You know what I mean? Is it just me, or like, other than this, emergency isolation support benefit that nobody seems to have qualified for, I've seen nothing else. I mean, all I see on the website and the announcements is more talk about loans and deferrals. I don't see any real action or support happening. Is there something I'm missing here?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I do think he's listening to Dr. Henshaw and the rest of his team very well on the medical side. I mean, we are leading the nation, and I think we're fourth in the world for amount of tests rolled out, and our what we're doing seems to be working as far as the containment of COVID goes.
Now, but that's not to the credit of our government. Let's give credit where credit is due.
Credit is due. That's the health.
That's a credit to our amazing healthcare infrastructure, which, by the way, some steps have been taken to make that not as efficient as it is right now, right?
Again, we're gonna be.
Well, let's disagree. Tell me what your perspective is on that. Let me, to me, what I see is, a government that's hell bent on, still implementing a budget that they put forth pre-pandemic. Like, I just don't understand that.
That may be a little bit rammy. I'll give you that. But what I'm seeing is, and what I hope again comes out of this is the ability for the unions, the AHS leadership, as well as the government to kind of work together on making sure that their costs become a little bit better controlled. It's a business 101 thing, right? You want your costs controlled as possible. And if you want to be able to deliver better and increasing healthcare with those dollars, you need to get more ROI for those dollars. That's what my hope is with all of this. Now, it's very adversarial right now. I won't try to sugarcoat that. Between the unions, AHS, and I'm just using AHS as an example because we're talking about healthcare, and the government it is very, very adversarial to the point that it's going to be tough for them to work together. But if they can successfully figure out how to work together, I think there are some actual cost savings that could come out of this and actually be reinvested back into the healthcare system to give us better better outcomes post-pandemic.
I know, but Derek, shouldn't we be having those conversations post-pandemic? Like, is this the time to be talking about cost savings?
No, I do agree that it is the wrong time to continue down that path. I won't argue that with you, but it's a good time as well too to understand, to focus on that long term and say, this is where we want to get this. This is why we're doing this. And a lot of times the why gets lost when there's an announcement made. Is okay, we're cutting, in the example of the doctors, okay, we're cutting this contract. There wasn't really that discussion about why we're cutting the contract, and that's where that loses the impact at that stage, and loses the narrative to, oh, we're just cutting the contract. No, we're doing it for a reason. I agree that should be done post-pandemic, but we still need to be tracking the why of these decisions.
Yeah, but you know what, it's again, as a small business owner, like, I look at it like, if it was my decision to make, what would I do? So there's, two things. There's a one of like, this is a unique scenario, and for the next 3 to 6 months, I'm just gonna, do what has to be done and worry about cost savings later. Yeah. Or there's a scenario of like, every, tough decision I have to be made, that has to be made, I make sure that I also do something compassionate, right? And I don't see that balance from the provincial government, right? So, let's, like, where's the help? Where's the assistance? Where's the support, right? If you have to make, decisions like, spending $7 billion on a pipeline at this time because you're preparing for post-pandemic, and I'm not for or against that right now. But what I'm saying is, okay, so how are you offsetting that of showing that you actually care about your citizens as well right now, right? And that's what I'm not seeing. Is I'm not seeing that sort of a balance, right? And it's all, and again, like I said, it's the whole 1 step forward and 2 steps back. It's like, you're saying that you care about, the frontline workers and all the great work that the essential workers in healthcare are doing, but you're not showing any action to back that up.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, there isn't a lot of programs that are being rolled out right now that do show that compassion. I'd like to see him, to be honest with you. I'd like to see him get back to, well, like you said, showing the support a little bit more than just saying it, and just, the thoughts and prayers answer to a lot of this. Show it, like you said, do something.
All I've seen is like deferrals of WCB payments, deferrals on property taxes, deferrals on utilities. Like, deferrals don't help, because all that means is you're pushing my debt, further down the line, which I have no idea that I can take care of once, this is all over. So you're just putting that, again, back to your discussion about mental health. You're just putting that on me as terms of a future mental health issue, right? So,
but I just don't see. There are programs that they can roll out right now that
absolutely.
That, we look at, you look at other provinces and what they're doing. The utilities that I mentioned about Ontario.
Yeah, BC, who would have thunk it? Doug Ford is leading the charge on capacity in Ontario.
The Ontario Liberals, I was having a discussion with some Ontario Liberals this morning, and they don't like that too much.
No, but listen, you know what? This is like, back to our conversation about elected official, about not judging a book by its cover, right? I think in these times, true, whether they're doing it just for optics or not, true leadership shines through, right? And
it does.
And Doug Ford, everybody, made light of his, what was it, for the people, or whatever his slogan was, but he's actually living that right now. He actually is doing things for the people, right? That's right. So you're absolutely right. I mean, we don't, I've always questioned this about, government policy and action. It's just like, you don't have to even look at countries like Denmark or look to what our states are doing in the US. You can look local at, and, the worst case scenario is like, assume that they've given this some thought and just mimic them for, for simplicity.
Well, mimic them or reach out. Again, we're in this era of, information flowing so quickly, and there's so much access to information. Certain organizations instantaneously reached out. So this Chamber of Commerce, like we talked about that Chamber of Commerce, that survey that came out, that was out within 2 days.
Yeah.
Why can't the government of Alberta roll that out to small businesses and say, guys, how can we help? We're on the front lines. Where do you get the best solutions for problems? Go to your frontline people.
I know, but do you
Talk
feel
to them.
that? You feel like that's such a big issue, though, Derek, that if I have to tell my elected officials like what my pains are, like, don't you think like that's such a huge gap in terms of their lives and our lives, right? Because let's face it, their salaries aren't at risk. You know what I mean? They're getting their paychecks. Doesn't matter if they're working from home or where they're working from. Our elected officials, let's all keep in mind, like their salaries are not at risk.
They're stable. Yeah.
They're stable, right? So they don't have the same worries that we have. And also, I mean, if they ever even experience the worries of a small business owner or hourly
very few
wage,
of them have. That's true.
maybe in high school or university was the last time they experienced that, right? So, and I feel like that's the big, gap in terms of the ability for these leaders to actually just act on compassion. Like, do I really need to explain to you? Do I really need to explain to you what the pains of a small business? Do I really need to explain? You need to poll me to tell me what the pains of a family is. Like, it's just,
unfortunately, yes.
You're right. I mean, like, look at the city of Edmonton and like their, ill thought out. We're gonna reduce like the number of buses so that we can, clean them better, right? And have the opposite effect of like, buses packed with people in the middle of a pandemic. I
got a great story about that. My wife instantaneously, she knows that I've been working with a couple of counselors, and instantaneously she gets to work. She works for the Alberta Municipal Affairs, and instantaneously there's a text on my phone when I get to work. Derek, I need you to call the counselor buddies and tell them this bus is ridiculous. This is the dumbest idea I've ever heard of. So being the good husband that I am, I pass that on immediately. And in talking to the counselors, like, yeah, you're about the 1,000th person that has called me about this.
But yet half of our council, talk about how they're such big proponents of public transport. That's all I've heard for the last like 8 years is like how our city council, is all about, density and public transport. And, that's why we're building all these LRTs. And all of you geniuses couldn't figure out that it's a bad idea to switch to Saturday schedule, and that maybe actually the idea is to put more buses on the road so that people can spread out, right? It's just these are kinds of things that to me it's just like that. It's just like as much as they talk about these kinds of things as they have no real experience. Again, this morning I'm watching these guys, all our counselors, have their Facebook live sessions, like seems like daily or every second day. And it's all thoughts and prayer conversation. Like, I was watching counselor this morning and it's still trying to explain to me why social isolation is necessary. Like, dude, like move on, man. Like we have medical experts and every other so-called thought leader in the world telling me why isolation and distancing is important. I don't need that from my elected officials in week 3. What I need is
stick to your lane, right? Don't stick to your lane conversation.
It's the equivalent of thoughts and prayers. It really is.
It really is. It is. You're absolutely right. What I want from an elected official is coming out and saying, this is the information I'm going to get you, and I'm going to get you this, and start making some ironclad statements that says, I am going to do this for you to try to get this done. If it fails, it fails. Nobody is going to hold an elected official accountable if he tries something and it fails at this point.
Not just that, but it'd be good to know, like maybe the case is, and you and I don't know, that they're working on all kinds of amazing initiatives, and it just takes time. That. But tell us, here's what we're working on. You know what I mean? Like, each counselor, if you're doing your Facebook lives, etc., like tell us what's happening behind the closed doors. What are you guys working on? What is the struggle? And this is, a big part of, I'm sure you've experienced change management as well in organizations. There's 2 kinds. There's the kind that's all done behind closed doors and then sprung on everybody.
It inevitably blows up every time.
And it blows up all the time. Doesn't matter how much money and time you spend implementing it. Or there's the kind where everybody's involved at every step of the way. Everybody knows what's going to happen. Everybody knows what the management is working on. And I see none of that from the city. It's just like, tell us, like, I understand that these things take time, and also you're beholden on, to some other levels of government, and you're, worried about cash flow, et cetera, et cetera. But tell us, what are you working on? What's
at risk?
And what can we also too, like, bring in, they always talk about this public consultation, and I don't truly think that government understands what public consultation is. Public consultation, especially in this time, is use the public to advocate for you. not just call them to some meeting and feed us some stale sandwiches and ask us our opinions, which you're gonna not take into account anyway.
You're gonna write down and then throw out.
Yeah, and then you throw it and have us fill out online surveys and stuff. No, make us your advocates. Tell us what's happening. Tell us what you're trying. If I knew what some of the challenges were, you and I would be talking about that right now. Hey, listen, man, the city's working on this, but here are some of the challenges that everybody needs to know. I have no idea. What are the challenges of in my opinion, as a layperson, is that it's very simple. If you own 100% of EPCOR, to just tell them how you want utilities to be handled for the next 3 to 6 months. Okay,
it's the most direct path. Yeah.
If that's not the case, and I'm sorely misinformed, then please tell me what the challenges are and how I can help.
That's engaging those frontline people, and that's what I was mentioning earlier. Engage those frontline people. We're the frontline people. We understand this. Engage them in problem solving. It's a fault of anyone with an ego that size to think they can go it alone and solve everybody's problems. No, we're better as a collective.
Absolutely.
And that's what they don't realize yet.
This is the problem with municipal politics, right? It's just like municipal politics right now should be the quickest to act, right? Oh. They should be the quickest to act. They are the closest to our everyday needs, to the closest to the citizens, right? In terms of utilities and infrastructure, et cetera, right? You should be the quickest to act. Our city is the slowest to act. Out of all 3 levels of government, I would say, I would grade them as right now the slowest to act. Not even to the point of being the slowest to act. I have no idea what they're actually working on, right? I have no idea.
Your guess is as good as mine on that as well.
Exactly,
too,
right? So, when we put out this podcast, I would happily love to hear, what exactly it is that they're working on, what initiatives, what are the challenges, how can we as everyday citizens help? What do you need us to do? Do you need us to help you put pressure on, EPCOR, et cetera? I mean, that's what citizens are best at. You know what I mean? That's what social media is for.
The group mentality, right? Instead of using a lot of things done.
Yeah, instead of using social media to do your Facebook Live, public engagement where you
use it to call for action.
Use it to call for action. What can we do? We all are sitting at home. We all have more time on our hands than ever before. How do you want us to help? How do you want us to engage, right?
That would be great. That would be great to see. I mean,
absolutely.
The thoughts and prayers can only go so far, but let's see what we can actually do. And I don't want to hear again, everything is on the table. I've heard that hey, guess what? Everything is on the table. Everything is on the table. We're thinking about everything. No, guys, come on. This is where poker, leaders come out and say,
let's not gamble with people's lives, right? This isn't poker.
That's right. Let's come out and let's be ironclad and say, guys, this is what we're going to put pressure on. And exactly like what you said, we can get the citizens to come out and we can put some pressure where pressure is due. Just give us that power to do it. Give us that ability to come out and help you out. We're all willing. That's another thing that I've noticed throughout this pandemic is there are so many people out there that are willing to help. It's just a matter of getting them organized. And if that, stay in your lane, politician, don't tell me to social distance, organize us.
Yeah.
Be that organizer. That's why we elected you. Be that organizer to say, hey, I've got 1,000 people here that can, put pressure on EPCOR, or 1,000 people here that are willing to help out truckers or something like that. That's what politicians are best at, is garnering people and
I know, but this is the problem, Derek, that we have, right? Is that because of corporate wealth care, our governments are more afraid of large corporations than they are of citizens. You know what I mean? It's the federal government, same thing. Like, our federal government saying that, the reason why they tried to slip in that, unlimited power to raise taxes was so they could use it as a stick with banks. You don't need that. You know what a stick with banks is? Us, citizens. You want a large stick? Activate citizens.
They've got a bigger stick than that, my friend.
Instead of telling us that 6-month deferrals is this amazing thing banks are giving us, tell us that it's a shitty thing that banks are giving us, and that we need to demand more. Right? That's where the pressure should come from. You want to see real action. You want to see corporations really bend. Put the consumers in power. Inform us. Engage us. Tell us what's happening, what your challenges are. You don't need unlimited tax powers to get banks in line. What you need is citizens to protest and just say, listen, man, I'm not paying. I'm not paying.
We're all going to stop paying our mortgage now.
Yeah, we're going to all stop paying our mortgage, and good luck collecting from me later. Right? Yeah. We will all collectively default. Good luck.
Try to sell 30 million homes or whatever the home count is on the market.
There's a lineup right now for people to buy my house, right?
Yeah.
So good luck, and if you want to get into like the hard asset business, like good luck, right? So, there's ways that I just don't understand, and it is, I think it's, the power is in the wrong hands, and this isn't the first time anybody's been having this conversation, but
sorry, go ahead.
I really think this pandemic, it puts a spotlight on that more than ever, of the fact that our governments don't first of all know how to really engage us and consult with us and use their citizens to effectively get the measures through that they need to get through, but also too of where the true power lies.
Yeah, I mean, the true power is completely out of the citizens' hands. That's right. And I mean, to be able to take that back and get our voices heard again that would be pretty monumental coming out of this.
Let's even go even further. And we talked about three levels. Let's talk globally, right? Okay, so everybody's saying China's back on track, and they're gonna actually not see as big of an economic hit as everybody else. And I'm like, really? Okay, so awesome. Let's say China's manufacturing industry like kicks off, and their supplying countries are all humming away. Who's gonna buy their shit? Consumer spending accounts for 2/3 of global spending. 2/3. Yep. Right? We don't have any money. Who's gonna buy?
Nobody's buying anything at that point.
Who's gonna buy your stuff? You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think, I saw the UN, made a recommendation for $2.5 trillion of stimulus or rescue for developing countries, which, I don't like the word developing countries. I prefer previously occupied countries or previously colonized countries. That's a whole different conversation. But yeah, I mean, like $1 trillion for loans, $1 trillion for forgiveness, and $500 billion for health recovery. You know what I mean? Like, that's what kind of stuff that China should be spearheading. Not, hey, by the way, we're okay, and now we're going to get our manufacturing.
We're going to start pumping our stuff out.
Yeah, you better take care of your consumers before you worry about, getting your manufacturing industry kickstarted again. Because again, you can have all the supply in the world. If there ain't no demand, good luck, right? So, why isn't China taking part of that? China should be the first one to put up their hand and be like, yeah, we'll contribute to that 2.5 trillion. How much do you need?
Well, that's the whole thing, right? I mean, we talked about balance sheet recessions, and how China has acted so poorly throughout leading up to this. China and Germany, I think, were the two worst as far as balance sheet recessions go. Basically, what they've been doing is hoarding money for the longest time and putting it in bad assets. So it's time for China, like you said. You've got a bad history of you've got a bad history with human rights violations and treating your employees very badly and hoarding money and hoarding resources. China, you can come out, you can step up to this, and you can foot that tab very easily for those, those previously occupied countries. I'll use your term, but you can foot that bill easily, and you can do what's right for your markets. And if China wants to look at their markets as the individual countries, great, use that. You can help those countries get back to par a lot quicker by acting correctly right now.
Absolutely, and this is like, I've always said this, is that, politics are so behind in terms of truly understanding branding, right? It's like, this is such a huge branding opportunity for every country, every government, right? Is that, the way that you behave now will forever label you, right? Doug Ford is a perfect example, right? If Doug Ford keeps on the path that he is, he's going to be, he's going to ride this through to another mandate, right? So, and globally, you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, I'm very hesitant and reluctant to point fingers in terms of, humanitarian failures for any country, because I think we should also look at our own failures before we start doing that. So I don't want to get into that conversation, but absolutely, like, this is such a great opportunity for every country that wants to elevate itself in the eyes of its neighbors.
If they have the resources.
If they have the resources, which, I mean, let's face it, China does, right?
That's right. I mean, that's a big thing that we've got to worry about too, is virtue signaling for the sake of virtue signaling and just spending money for the sake of spending money.
Yeah.
no, we got to make sure that the countries that have been very well off coming into this are the ones that can lead us out of it as well too.
Absolutely. I mean, character, and that includes for government, because government at the end of the day is made up of people. So, it's always revealed in these times, right? And I think, Trump just announcing that, the 3M can't sell us any, was it masks or ventilators? I can't.
It was the N95 masks, but did you see 3M's response?
No, I didn't. What was the response?
Oh, 3M in their nicest PR language, basically, quote unquote, pound sand. We're going to do it anyway. Absolutely,
because there's a corporation that understands communications and branding, right? There's a corporation that understands it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the difference, right? Is that, Trump in his short-term thinking doesn't understand what the long-term effects of something like that is, considering, how much, we've helped out the U.S. in the past, everything from, the Huawei incidents to, our help in response to 9/11 and et cetera, et cetera. I mean,
Trudeau's example this morning was nurses going from Windsor to Detroit because there's a massive shortage of nurses. So that was Trudeau's example in his presser.
But the problem that we have is that's our neighbor, Derek.
Exactly. You got to do it.
If his house is on fire, our house is going to catch on fire, right? So we can't take our eyes off of what's happening down there in terms of this pandemic and how that's going to affect us. So, okay, what's your hopes after this is all over? What would you like to see as a family man and as a small business owner?
Well, okay, so I'm just going to deal with the family man stuff first, because that's always first and foremost in my list. I hope that people realize how great being part of a social world is. Being cooped up and being isolated really makes you yearn for those personal interactions again. Just to be able to simply shake a hand or give a hug. Those kind of things as a family man, I enjoy those a lot, and I always have, and I've always been a very, very heart first kind of guy. So I really hope that we see, kind of that social revolution of being nice to people and being okay with physical contact again. I'm looking forward to getting back to that. As a business owner, I'm hoping that as a small business owner, what I've found, a lot of governments like to say, we support SMEs and we support medium-sized enterprises and stuff like that. I hope coming out of this, there's more concrete support for small businesses, because they realize we are a 90% employer. We represent 94% of the businesses in any given economy. And I hope that they realize that there is more support needed for these people and for my small business colleagues. I hope that comes out. On the government side, I'm hoping that people realize that collaborative efforts are needed. Not just go at it yourself. If I can be the one person that has the biggest ego and ram through whatever I want, I really hope, and I truly do hope, that there's a realization that collaborative efforts and proper consultation comes out of this. It is so important to understand who solves the problems and who has those great ideas to solve the problems. One person can't do it alone. And as soon as that ego gets in the way, they got to get out of the way, because that is detrimental to a lot of people. You just look at Trump. That ego is gigantic. It's the biggest ego in the world, and he's doing things that cause people to have massive health issues, if not die. Straight up, that's just too much. What are some of my other hopes? I don't know. Those are the big ones that just came to me off the top of my head, that I'm looking forward to that collaboration coming back, and a collaborative style, get away from the me first attitudes and understand that we are better, we function better as a unit rather than just individuals.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a optimistic realist, I like to say, which means I hope for the best but prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
So I think that, hopefully that coming out of this, we all cherish you know, our relationships a little bit more and are a little bit more gentle with how we interact with each other. You know, but our memories are short as human beings, right? And, you know, I think sort of the law of thirds is going to apply after this is all over. I think a third of people will go back to doing everything the same way that they always have done, and you know, going back to behaving and acting the way they always have. You know, you already got the job creators, you know, the billionaire class demanding that we get back to things the way they were, because those things that's
what they want. That's where they're comfortable. They want that predictability.
Right. And I think a lot of us are going to, you know, as we, you know, and no fault to anyone and no judgment, because, you know, after this, we're all going to be heads down trying to take care of our livelihoods and our families. I think a third of people are going to maybe reflect a little bit during this time, depending how long it goes on, and make some changes, you know, in their lives, and adjust and, you know, try to have more balanced lifestyles than just the crazy consumerism and working to pay debts and working to buy things kind of mentality we've had for decades. And I think another, you know, hopefully another third of people make serious changes, you know what I mean? And seriously, you know, look at the way that we live our lives. I mean, you can't continue, and this has been a long time coming, right? Is, you know, one of the negative sides of globalization is that, you know, you can't be reliant on all of your goods and services to come from somewhere else, right? Like, you know, a nation that doesn't, you know, make its own to some degree, make its own food and make its own necessities, essentials of life, food, shelter, and clothing, is always going to be subject to, you know, these kinds of
beholden of somebody else.
Beholden of someone else. Yeah, absolutely right. So, you know, and that goes down to the individual level. You know, I've talked about this before too. You know, we should take this time to make sure that even individually we can take care of ourselves, right? It's, you know, learning how to build things and grow things is never wasted.
Learn how to can.
Learn how to can. My mother-in-law reminded me that, because I always make fun of like her storage in her basement of like canned goods and things, and you know, she's like, "Oh, you're not making fun of me now, are you?"
I saw a great meme early on in this. It was to deal with Ukrainians. They go, yeah, Ukrainians have been building, you know, doing this for decades. We've been building up for this pandemic for decades. And I laugh. I'm part Ukrainian in my heritage. And I looked in my cold cellar downstairs, and I'm like, yep, I got an 18-month supply of jam. I've got peaches. I've got everything canned here. I'm good.
Absolutely. And, you know, at the realist side of me is, you know, let's not, you know, let's look at, we've actually seen now in real life how our elected officials will behave, you know, when it comes time to taking care of us. You know, the rhetoric is all gone. I mean, the rhetoric's still there, but we can hopefully see through it now. And I hope we take it more seriously the next time they come for our votes and our donations. You know, I mean, those emails haven't ended for, you know, in terms of parties asking me for donations at this time, right? Yeah. So, you know, that's how tone deaf some of our political parties are. So
it's you got to re-engage the people. I mean, it's become too easy for people, corporations, et cetera, to view people as a lump.
Yeah.
And, you know, once and we can get into the algorithms and stuff like that, but once the algorithms have, you know, put you into certain categories, it becomes very easy to sell to and look at people as a mass. No,
and we allow them to treat us that way too, right? Is like,
that's right, and
even look at
we've got to push back on that.
Right? Yeah, even some of these initiatives, right? You know, it's ridiculous that you're treating wage owners like salaried people, right? Or that you're treating, you know, a small business that's less than 10 people, you know, the same as a corporation of 500 people, right? It's like, you know, we've allowed this kind of thing to continue on and on. I mean, everything from the way they approach us for our votes to how they put in public policy is this. And this is, you know, again, you know, learning from, you know, the business side of things, you know, is, you know, okay, you're behind on learning about branding, but, you know, politically, we're so behind on learning about the difference between demographics and, you know, psychographics, right? Is that understanding that now, because of social media, because of technology, people are more individual than ever before, right? Yep. So yes, you know, you and I have some things in common, which we've already talked about, small business owners and, you know, children and things like that. But also too, I mean, the things that we do with our time, the interests that we have, you know, everything from, you know, the clothes we wear and the cars we drive and all these decisions we make is a better determinant of my attitudes towards anything from government policy to, you know, what kind of recreation facility I want around my house than the fact that I'm, you know, X age and I'm and educated at this level, and, you know, all the demographic things that political
tracked,
political parties still put way too much value and an emphasis on.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see that. You know, we live in that age where big data is available that can give us those determinations. Why not use it? Like you said,
corporations shifted away from that, like that, and I was there for that shift when I worked on the corporate side of, you know, shifted away from this approach to where we used to be like, okay, so like I said, I work in packaged goods, so it's like, you know, this female, 44 years old, post-secondary educated, X household income is our target demographic for our, you know, whatever detergent or whatever, right? Long ago, like that has been put aside. Like that's important still to understand, but really what's more important now is how she spends her time, what are her interests, how she's engaged, who does she spend her time with, her inner circle, because we now understand that that influences.
That's a bigger influencer than anything else.
Right? And it seems like our politics haven't caught up to that and that understanding. And it's also because they don't want to spend the time, right? It's harder. It's much harder, right? To do that, right? I mean, I tell my door knockers all the time when I'm working on campaigns is like, one person ask those survey questions, one person observe, take a look at what's on the driveway.
What's the body language? What's that 85% of the communication happening that is not verbal, right?
Not even that, like, well, how many shoes are there? Is there children's shoes? Is there, you know, what kind of cars and brands are significant? Is there some golf clubs or toys and things like that can give you an indication better of what this person might be engaged in? The person who, for example, a hockey parent who spends all of their weekend at hockey arenas, right, is going, that, you know, dad or mom is more influenced by those other hockey parents than by anything else that has anything to do with their income or education. Those people that they spend their mornings with or all day with, in some cases on the weekends, influence their decisions more than anything else. And it doesn't seem like our political parties have any grasp of how that conversation and that decision making happens.
Well, like you said, it's just, it's very hard for them, but it should be the job.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at it, he goes, you know, there's some good retail politicians in the city that do very well on the reach out side and to understand those people. But then there's other ones that like you said, it's politics by numbers almost. You know, we've done it this way forever. Let's just lather, rinse, and repeat and do the same thing over and over again. Put in your 2 terms, move on to the next one, because that's the next thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's frustrating because we've lost the passion. You know, we've lost that passion about people.
Yeah. You know, and at the end of the day, like, you know, I'm going to tell you right now, nothing's going to change unless we demand it to change.
Yeah.
And nothing's going to change until citizens themselves, you know, start truly voting with their dollars and their actual votes and holding accountable. I mean, like I said, we have this period of time right now where we can actually, you know, do what we've always wanted to do during an election cycle, is to have a track history of truly how our elected officials behave during a time of crisis, right?
That's right.
And anyone who thinks that they, you know, it's like they say, like, you know, if you ever wondered how you would behave during any of the, you know, tragedies or big moments in history, you know, if you always wonder what you would have done in Nazi Germany and what you would have done during the Depression, you're doing it now. And so are our elected officials.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully, indicator. At the end of the day, hopefully that moves that needle, right? I mean, you look at, so I spent, you know, years in HR prior to being an entrepreneur. And the one thing that we were always preaching when we were doing interviews and stuff like that is try to get into that past behavior, you know, do situational based interviews and understand how people react in those situations. You look at politics right now, it's very, you know, when they go into debates and stuff like that, it's all pre-canned and it's all very, very future-based, and what would you do in this situation, and allow them to pontificate about what would happen in the future. No, let's get back to what they've done in the past. Let's grill them on what they've done in the past, and hold them accountable to, this is what you've done in the past. How is your future behavior going to change? Are you going to change, or are you going to be that same person? If you're going to be that same person, if it's good and it's repeatable, hey, maybe you're still that positive candidate. But if it's complete gibberish right from the get-go, let's get that person out. Let's not vote that person in, no matter what that cult of personality tells us, that this person should be voted in because they are that person. No, let's get the real substantive people, passionate people about what they do. Get them in there to cause the change, or be that spark for change, right? So.
Well said, Derek. Thanks so much for having this conversation with me. I'm glad that we had it. People want to follow you. Facebook is the best place. I think you're most active on Facebook, or also Twitter. Are you active on Twitter as well?
Not very active on Twitter, unfortunately. Yeah, Facebook. Full disclaimer that there's a lot of unfiltered opinions that come through on there. So full disclosure, you will be there will be some explicit language on that.
Absolutely. So if you guys want the real analysis of things that are happening, follow Derek Cockroft, Cockroft.
That's correct.
Cockroft on Facebook, and engage with him. And I mean, he's always open, and I know to other opinions and differing opinions. So thanks for joining me, Derek. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate this, Najib. It's, this has been fantastic. I always love talking to you, and I can't wait to give you a big hug once it's all over.
Yeah, man. Us with our giant grizzly beards.
Exactly. They'll be intertwined. It'll be glorious.
All right, my friend. Have a good day.
You as well. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.